So just a little context, and Jane's going to talk about all the fantastic stuff that we've been doing now. I was probably more involved in the first 10 years, but to set the context of the organization, in some ways it's not your typical environmental organization. So we don't define ourselves, although we had some incidents in the past where we were opposed to citing a school in a city park, but we define ourselves by what we're supportive of. And primarily that's about the city. So when I looked at the formation of this organization, one of the things that had struck me was that when you look at a topographic map, the green stops when you get to the city and it turns gray. And in fact, the city's rich with natural resources. So the organization is really to get people to think about that cities are actually the solution to a lot of our environmental problems. We're not the problem, and that's one of the ways of sort of rethinking things. And that's really part of what this organization is about, is to get people to think about the environment in a way that's positive and that the city is part of that change. Just recently, David Owen has done a couple of books. He's a writer for the New Yorker. You may see some of his stuff. And he talks about New York City, and he makes a point that the cities aren't the enemy of the environment, there's a solution to it. And that the New York City, people consume less energy than people living out in the wilds of Vermont or in the suburbs. So the more that we're about promoting the city as a livable place, and I think we share that mission with the Lowell Sun. Lowell has always prided itself at being at the forefront, whether it's a national park, whether it's an industrial city. And the Lowell Parks and Conservation Trust as a little organization really has a national leadership role, and we see ourselves as not just a local organization, but an organization that's working on a national mission about environmental quality improvement. So when we do whitewater rafting, we're actually getting people in the water, we're getting them wet. When we do our lock tender training,
including our reporter.
Yes. You've all done that. I mean, you know it. It's not something out there that... It's not something out there. You actually engage with the environment. So all of our programs are trying to get people engaged with our volunteers. When we run, we've trained people to operate the historic locks. You know, that was something that we initiated at the beginning, so people are engaged. It's not history in the abstract, it's history in the real. And that comes out through our programming and some of the stuff that Jane's going to talk about in the context. So that's sort of been the kind of underlying mission in the stuff that we do. Huge.
Well, we're one of only 10 in Massachusetts that have been accredited. We're one of the few urban land trusts in the entire country. So in terms of, it took us about 5 years to do it. We started in 2004 and then put a lot of effort in the last 5 years. I think if anything, it's really more about credibility and helping people understand that we've met a level of excellence and expectation that the land that we're going to protect we can care for in perpetuity. But it's not just about our land. It is a land trust accreditation, but the extent to which they had to look into our financials and the quality of our board, the quality of our programs, how we do our programs, how we document it, how we keep our records. So that if somebody wants to make a donation to us in this city, we're the folks to do it with, because we've met. It was as rigorous a process as a school or a museum. Looking ahead, there's a lot to celebrate. The back of the Spalding House has had an incredible transformation with some significant sort of hardscape landscaping back there. We received our accreditation in September in Providence. The Greenway's on its way. Again, there's another large section that'll be done. We're really the catalyst on the project. It is a city park. So the funding has come into the city, but we've played a lot of the roles behind the scenes in terms of bringing in the value-added pieces, like the multilingual signage, the public art, outdoor classroom, and raising the funds.
The Trust for Public Land, which is a national organization, actually for the Edward Street soccer field, actually came in and they bought that property and they held it until it was then purchased by the city. They came in and it was a distressed property at the time. It had gone into foreclosure under the when we had the first savings and loan crisis, and I can't remember what it was called back then. But we brought them in as a larger entity with deeper pockets, and they bought it. And we've used that same model right up through recently with the Hawk Valley Farm and the trustees of reservations. And you'll hear about that on our education programs where we partner with Mass Audubon. So it's not about our organization. We're sort of, as Jane says, the perfect word is really catalyst for others.
This summer we'll be running 3 month-long simultaneous intensive summer school programs, as well as an additional week with the National Park Service. A lot of this is done directly through the public schools. We're extending the day for kids in Lowell, often in the neediest schools, to get their STEM-based learning. We do it through funds. They don't realize they're doing it. We've got and we work with kids grades 3 all the way through post-high school, actually.
Some people are natural born leaders. I am not one of them.
What I want to talk to all of you about is how the Compass program by all my teachers and whatnot impacted me and other children in their help with their education in the classroom.
Being the new kid in a school of 3,000 kids is a difficult thing, and that is where the environmental club comes in.
Yeah, but before I did this, the words after in school never went together. That's not a thing.
It makes me want to explore and learn about the history and culture of Lowell. It's something that I would never have thought of doing if I had never joined the program.
And I got to environmental. I thought I was going to do a lot of physical activities like digging holes and planting trees and a bunch of cool stuff, but we actually learned things. Science and stuff.
The first thing that they asked me when they sat down and as a big group was, what does it mean to conserve? And as a kid at the time, I thought, oh, well, you go around hugging trees and making sure the trees are okay. You plant them and that's all you have to do, water them every day. But it's more than that.
We set the boxes all around Freshman Academy so that kids had a place where to recycle, so there would be no excuse not to recycle. So the idea that I thought was going to be small turned out to be big.
It made us feel the impact that we made on our community as well as feel a sense of accomplishment of what we've done the past year.
I am proud because it feels like I left a mark, not just me, but our whole group.
I learned to make decisions in Compass, such as working on school more than working on sports or vice versa. But I never thought I would be here in front of a bunch of people who actually care about what I have to say, and with a bunch of friends that are just incredible people.
We are not just an after-school program, but we are a community.
When you give a child an after-school program and you see that they're enjoying being there, know that they're not just there for the activity. They're learning about themselves, they're learning how to interact with others, and they're learning about their own health.
There's hope and there's always a step. So when Gwen asks me, what does it mean to conserve? I can finally say it's finding that fine balance between us as humans and nature and learning to get along with them. Thank you so much for having me here.
So those kids spoke before a room of 80 adults with virtually no prep. None of that was coached, other than on a bus ride down by Bora at the very end. And so they spoke to a room full of 80 adults and a standing ovation, and then none of us expected them to do what they did and say what they did.
I don't know if you're involved in the the river walk, but I get complaints all the time. When is it going to be finished? It just ends. There's no lighting. They took off poorly maintained. There's garbage. We're supposed to be trying to make it attractive for people to walk in, and it's a great resource. And yet, resource is nothing without results. Okay, and it seems like we get funding, we do things in half measures, and then we either lose funding or there's no follow through to the end until the next source of revenue comes. So if you were to give us a state of things, and not in a negative, but if you're looking with your broad, you get your big hat on. I mean, if you had an unlimited budget, where would you attack? What were some of the areas you go? Starting with the good stuff first.
I was invited to work with the Audubon Society, and in South Lowell, where East Pond, it actually abuts the property that I have my shop at. We were able to bring the classroom down to the pond and have the kids actually see this green space, see wildlife, and actually do some sampling, and just to see the excitement and have a connection was valuable for me. And I think if we could expand that would be one thing that I think would be really.
An 8-year-old got up and spoke in front of the city council to advocate for this park, for the development of this park. That was in the Tanner Street Economic Development Plan.
Right.
Right. So, you know, for us, it's all about connections, right?
Where's the other pond, by the way?
The other pond is at the Pine School, behind Shed Park.
Really?
Hidden. Yeah, good question. Yeah, so
So
most people don't know
does it
that.
get any use? Is it public land?
It's right at the school, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we're working with there's some active parents there that we'd like to help them use that pond more. And there is sometimes some summer school programming going on there. So personally, I'd love to see some stronger connections between these trails. On the Greenway, you know, we don't invest in something like the Greenway unless we're going to help take care of it. It's not a city park. We provide, except for mowing that the city does, we provide all of the other volunteer, I mean, a lot of weeding
So
goes
who
into
takes
that.
care of Kittredge Park?
There are some volunteers. We actually manage the income from an endowment that was set up when Paul Songus died. And we do pay nominally a landscaper to go there every summer, but he only gets like $1,000 for the summer, so he's not doing much.
Well, why doesn't the city cut the grass and stuff?
They do. They cut
Okay.
the grass, and so the way when we set up
They don't
an,
do the plantings.
Right.
and-
they don't do the fine tuning of the perennials. You know that park really needs that, right? And people, that's what you pay attention to, isn't it, when you drive
Yeah,
by?
yeah.
And so,
There's no fault, right.
right. So that's what the landscaper comes in and does, and
Yeah.
that's.
You know, you mentioned earlier about the organization getting involved in a political cause. And, you know, one of the thing that I remember the most is the fight over the South Common. You know, and there's been talk about building a new Lowell High School on the South Common. And, you know, that's been put out there by a city councilor. Have you been watching that development? And are you prepared to, you know, get involved in that should the need arise? Because he's come out and said, you know, let's build it on the South Common.
Corey.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't speak for my board, and that's we're not going to
You got two of them,
necessarily. No, we have three of them.
Three, I'm sorry, Brian. All due respect, yeah.
I think that's a long way off, and it'd be premature, I think, right now.
And it would seem to me that if someone proposed the taking of a city park for a project like that would just fly in the face of everything that you've been trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think also that it just hasn't reached that point yet where it's worthy of us to spend time on responding to it.
It was interesting because when we got involved in the North Common, and we got, I think, kind of beat up at this sort of a principled thing. We started not sort of being an anti-group, but sort of, you want to put a school in a park that's one of the oldest parks in the city, kind of sort of crossed the line for us. But it became a rallying cry later, and when we talked about Edward Street soccer fields, it was sort of remember the North Common kind of thing, you know? So our sort of taking a position at that point in time, while it was difficult when that happened, it raised the issue where it hadn't been raised before with all the city councilors, that these parks aren't just something you can just go and use as you'd like to. So I think whatever happens with the proposal, I think it'll be given very close consideration based on some of the history of what's happened in the past.
And we own a property up on Fairmount Street in Belvedere. How much open space is there actually up on Belvedere Hill?
Yeah, who takes care of that? That's
None.
where the little park is. There's a bench there.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, that's us. That's 100% us. And it's owned by us. It just recently became 100% us when Joe Donahue died.
And we have an endowment for that allows us to maintain the park. So it's invested with through the community.
So if you're a neighbor and walking by there and you have ideas, we want to hear from you.